Greetings, one and all, back again to Exploring Arda, which is a Tolkien-centered podcast, and I am your host, Jackson. Now, hopefully, if everything goes well, I'll be up and posting up on YouTube. It'll be toward my personal channel, just because it's a little easier, and I'll be able to record longer videos, and right now, I think all of the episodes that I'll be working on will be the regular audio version with just like the image and the logo. But eventually, it'll come to a point where you guys will be watching me. Hopefully. I'm still working out all the tweaks of the video format and whatnot, but if all works well, here I am in video format. So we'll see about that. Now, to the point here is, now that we have gone through a lot of the Silmarillion, about 10 chapters now, and with a few notes regarding Melkor, I was about to call him Morgoth, but mostly Melkor before he was turned into Morgoth, and Eru Ilúvatar. So I figured with 10 chapters and a few thoughts out of the way already, I wanted actually to delve into more of Tolkien's other works as a little side project. So every 10 chapters or so with the main story, I'll be delving into some of his other shorter stories. So I thought it would be a good idea with the new format, new video, whatnot, to go with, see if I can get it here, the Smith of Wootton Major. See if I can get the title here. Yes, there you go. And I decided to go with Smith of Wootton Major because it's a shorter story, and I'm going to be doing this in 2 parts. So I'll be reading about 30 or so pages as my first episode, and then the second one, and the second episode will be all my final thoughts about what the book is all about. So, even though I have a bunch of books of Tolkien, I actually haven't read Smith of Wootton Major yet. The other book that is, the other story, I should say, that it's in this book is called Farmer Giles of Ham, which I actually have read, but I'll still reread it, obviously, because that's the whole point of what the show's about. So, yeah. I will be reading from this 1979 edition. Also, for the video format, I will be doing a whole lot of looking up and down. I haven't quite figured out how to really properly, showcase all this stuff. So, well, this is kind of like a first-time thing. So we'll see how it goes. Smith of Wootton Major was copyrighted in 1967 by George and Alan Unwin. So, pretty cool. 1967. This day and age, it's a pretty old book. But yes, I do have the 1979 edition. So, I think with that all out of the way, Smith of Wootton Major shall now begin. So let's just jump right into the story. Alright, here we go. There was a village once, not very long ago for those with long memories, nor very far away for those with long legs. Wootten Major it was called because it was larger than Wootten Minor, a few miles away deep in the trees, but it was not very large, though it was at that time prosperous, and a fair number of folk lived in it, good, bad, and mixed, as is usual. It was a remarkable village in its way, being well known in the country round about for the skill of its workers in various crafts, but most of all for its cooking. It had a large kitchen, which belonged to the village council, and the master cook was an important person. The cook's house and the kitchen adjoined the great hall, the largest and oldest building in the place, and the most beautiful. It was built of good stone and good oak, and was well tended, though it was no longer painted or gilded as it had been once upon a time. In the hall the villagers held their meetings and debates, and their public feasts and their family gatherings. So the cook was kept busy, since for all these occasions he had to provide suitable fare. For the festivals, of which there were many in the course of a year, the fare that was thought suitable was plentiful and rich. So I'm going to stop there a little bit, just to say that we get the vibe of Wootton Major and whatnot, and that pretty much it's a pretty joyous village. I would call it a village. It seems very small town vibe kind of deal. Obviously it definitely feels medieval in a way already. I'm assuming because Tolkien's vibe is very much fantasy, medieval stuff like that. I really did like how in the book here, is that yeah, kitchen and cook's house, great hall, it's all capitalized. And that's something that he does quite a bit. I kind of recognize that. A lot of the really important words that he wants to really put emphasis on, he'll capitalize, which is actually what I really like when I'm reading through all this stuff for the first time. It's really, really cool. So yeah, Wootten Major is I would say it's a small town vibe, but it has great importance and good times, good vibes. So, alright, so let's just get back into it. There was one festival to which all looked forward, for it was the only one held in winter. It went on for a week, and on its last day at sundown there was a merrymaking called the Feast of Good Children. Feast of Good Children, okay, to which not many were invited. No doubt some who deserved to be asked were overlooked, and some who did not were invited by mistake, for that is the way of things, however careful for those who arrange such matters may try to be. In any case, it was largely by chance of birthday that any child came in for the 24 feast, since that oh my god, I cannot talk. Since that was only held once in 24 years. Makes sense. And only 24 children were invited. Yeah. For that occasion, the master cook was expected to do his best, and in addition to many other good things, it was the custom for him to make the great cake. By the excellence, or otherwise, of this his name was chiefly remembered, for a master cook seldom, if ever, lasted long enough in office to make a second great cake. There came a time, however, when the reigning master cook, to everyone's surprise, since it had never happened before, suddenly announced that he needed a holiday, and he went away. No one knew where, and when he came back some months later, he seemed rather changed. He had been a kind man who liked to see other people enjoying themselves, but he was himself serious and said very little. Lost my place here. Now he was merrier, and often said and did most laughable things, and at feasts he would himself sing gay songs, which was not expected of master cooks. Also, he brought back with him an apprentice, and that astonished the village. It was not astonishing for the master cook to have an apprentice. It was usual. The master chose one in due time, and he taught him all that he could, and as they both grew older, the apprentice took on more of the important work, so that when the master retired or died, there he was, ready to take over the office and become master cook in his turn. But this master had never chosen his apprentice. I'm going to try to do a voice here. He had always said, "Time enough yet," or "I'm keeping my eyes open, and I'll choose one when I find one to suit me." But now he brought with him a mere boy, and not one from the village. He was more lithe than the Wootten lads and quicker, soft-spoken and very polite, but ridiculous to the young for work, barely in his teens by the look of him. Still, choosing his apprentice was as the master cook's affair, and no one had the right to interfere with it. So the boy remained and stayed in the cook's house until he was old enough to find lodgings for himself. People soon became used to seeing him about, and he made new friends. They and the cook called him Alf, but to the rest he was just Prentice. Alright, cool. We're going to take a little break with the story here just to say that, yeah, we get obviously introduced to the main, I guess, characters, multiple. There's obviously the master cook, and he went away for a little bit, and everybody was kind of freaked out, but then he came back, and they were, I guess, worried in a way, because the apprentice that he took came from somewhere else, which I guess is a bad sign, which is also a very, I guess, small town vibes, where it's like, if somebody comes in from somewhere else, and they have, like, they're pretty much getting taught the same skills as somewhere in town, they kind of like, not so much, no, not trustworthy of this guy. But nonetheless, he still sticks around, so everybody's like, okay, well, we'll see what he does. So that's what I kind of get the vibe of it right now. So let's just get back into reading. The next surprise came only 3 years later. One spring morning, the master cook took off his tall white hat, folded up his clean aprons, hung up his white coat, took a stout ash stick and a small bag, and departed. He said goodbye to the apprentice. No one else was about. "Goodbye for now, Alf," he said. "I'll leave you to manage things as best you can, which is always very well. I expect it will turn out all right. If we meet again, I hope to hear all about it. Tell them when I'm gone on another holiday, but this time I shan't be coming back." There was quite a stir in the village when Prentice gave this message to people who came to the kitchen. "What a thing to do," they said, "and without warning or farewell! What are we going to do without any master cook? No one. He has left no one to take his place." In all their discussions, no one ever thought of making young Prentice into cook. He had grown a bit taller, but still looked like a little boy, and he had only served for 3 years. In the end, for lack of anyone better, they appointed a man of the village who could cook well enough in a small way. When he was younger, he had helped the master at busy times, but the master had never taken to him and would not have him as apprentice. He was now a solid sort of man with a wife and children, and careful with money. "At any rate, he won't go off without notice," they said, "and poor cooking is better than none. It is 7 years till the next great cake, and by that time he should be able to manage it." Noakes, for that was his name, was very pleased with the turn things had taken. He had always wished to become master cook, and had never doubted that he could manage it. For some time, when he was alone in the kitchen, he used to put on the tall white hat and look at himself in a polished frying pan and say, "How do you do, master? That hat suits you properly. Might have been made for you. I hope things go well with you." Alright, yeah, okay, so I kinda like this. Another stopping point here is that, everybody freaks out because, the cook, just packs up his things, heads away, and, they don't want, Prentice here to take the lead, so, they're like, let's just find another guy that knows somewhat how to cook, but not as good. And then this, Noakes guy comes in, and he's like, "Aha, I will do the job." So, sure. I mean, I guess it makes sense for me. They don't want an apprentice who hasn't fulfilled his full training to make the great cake, because that's a really big deal in this town. So, I don't know. I kind of like this. I like the story so far. it's very intriguing. So, let's just get back into it here. Things went well enough, and at first Noakes did his best, and he had Prentice to help him. Indeed, he learned a lot from him by watching him slyly, though that Noakes never admitted. But in due course, that time for the 24 feast drew near, and Noakes had to think about making the great cake. Secretly, he was worried about it, for although with 7 years' practice he could turn out passable cakes and pastries for ordinary occasions, he knew that his great cake would be eagerly awaited, and would have to satisfy severe critics. Ooh. Not only the children. A smaller cake of the same materials and baking had to be provided for those who came to help at the feast. Also, it was expected that the great cake should have something novel and surprising about it, and not be a mere repetition of the one before. His chief notion was that it should be very sweet and rich, and he decided that it should be entirely covered in sugar icing, at which Prentice had a clever hand. "Oh, okay. That will make a pretty and fairy like," he said. He thought, I almost forgot his voice. Fairies and sweets were two of the very notions he had heard about the tastes of children. Fairies he thought one grew out of, but of sweets he remained very fond. "Ah, fairy-like," he said. "That gives me an idea." And so it came into his head that he would stick a little doll on a pinnacle in the middle of the cake, dressed all in white with a little wand in her hand, ending in a tinsel star, and Fairy Queen written in pink icing around her feet. Sorry, I got a little itch here. But when he began preparing the materials for the cake making, he found that he had only dim memories of what should go inside a great cake. So he looked in some old books of recipes left behind by previous cooks. They puzzled him, even when he could make out their handwriting, for they mentioned many things that he had not heard of, and some that he had forgotten and now had no time to get. But he thought he might try one or two of the spices that the books spoke of. He scratched his head, he scratched his head, there you go, and remembered an old black box with several different compartments in which the last cook had once kept spices and other things for special cakes. He had not looked at it since he took over, but after a search he found it on a high shelf in the storeroom. He took it down and blew the dust off the lid, but when he opened it he found that very little of the spices were left, and they were dry and musty. But in one compartment in the corner he discovered a small star, hardly as big as one of our sixpences, black-looking as if it were made of silver but was tarnished. "That's funny," he said, as he held it up to the light. "No, it isn't," said a voice behind him, so suddenly that he jumped. It was the voice of Prentice, and that he had never spoken to the master in that tone before. Indeed, he seldom spoke to Noakes at all unless he was spoken to first. Very right and proper in a youngster. He might be clever with icing, but he had a lot yet to learn. That was Noakes' opinion. "What do you mean, young fellow?" he said. not much pleased. "If it isn't funny, what is it?" "It is fey," said Prentice. "It comes from fairy." Then the cook laughed. All right, he said. "It means much the same, but call it that if you like. You'll grow up some day. Now you can get on with some stoning the raisins. If you notice any funny fairy ones, tell me." "What are you going to do with the star, master?" said Prentice. "Put it into the cake, of course," said the cook. "Just the thing, especially if it's fairy," he sniggered. "I dare say you've been to children's parties yourself, but not so long ago either, where little trinkets like this were stirred into the mixture, and little coins and whatnot. Anyway, we do that in this village. It amuses the children." "But this isn't a trinket, master. It's a fey star," said Prentice. "So you've said already," snapped the cook. "Very well, I'll tell the children. It'll make them laugh." "I don't think it will, master," said Prentice. "But it's the right thing to do. Quite right." "Who do you think you're talking to?" said Noakes. In time the cake was made and baked in ice, mostly by Prentice. "As you are so fed on fairies, as you are so set on fairies, I'll let you make the Fairy Queen." "Very good, master," he answered. "I'll do it if you are too busy." I'm sorry. "But it was your idea and not mine." "It's my place to have ideas and not yours," said Noakes. Yeah, and we'll do a little break here. Finally, Noakes gets the idea that other cooks before him might have had other ideas that they haven't quite, I guess, evolved deeper into. But then he actually goes into the secret black box that they have with like little compartments, and this little star is something that is just like, okay, that's kind of weird looking, but it kind of like triggers a memory, like, oh yeah, fairy people, like kids like these fairies and like imaginary things. And Prentice comes in and he's just like, I don't know if they're really stories or not. And Noakes obviously is just kind of like, that's fairy nonsense, that's fantasy, that's not real. And Prentice is like, okay, whatever you say, just make the cake and I'll make the Fairy Queen and the icing and I'll help you out with their stuff. It's like a one big argument of like, oh, if fairies are real or not, and especially the difference between younger and older folk here of, are they real or not? I don't know. Maybe they are, according to the story. So we'll just keep reading. At the feast, the cake stood in the middle of the long table, inside a ring of 24 red candles. Its top rose like a small white mountain, up the sides of which grew little trees glittering as if with frost. Ooh, that's hard to read. On its summit stood a tiny white figure on one foot like a snow maiden dancing, and in her hand was a minute wand of ice sparkling with light. The children looked at it with wide eyes, and one or two clapped their hands, crying, "Isn't it pretty and fairy-like?" That delighted the cook, but the apprentice looked displeased. They were both present, the master to cut up the cake when the time came, and the apprentice to sharpen the knife and hand it to him. There you go. At last the cook took the knife and stepped up to the table. "I should tell you, my dears," he said, "that inside this lovely icing there is a cake made of many nice things to eat. But also stood well in there are many pretty little things, trinkets and little coins and whatnot. And I'm told that it is lucky to find one in your slice. There are 24 in the cake, so there should be one for each of you, if the Fairy Queen plays fair. But she doesn't always do so. She's a tricky little creature. You ask Mr. Prentice." The apprentice turned away and studied the faces of the children. "No, I'm forgetting," said the cook. "There's 25 this evening. There's also a little silver star, a special magic one, or so Mr. Prentice says. So be careful. If you break one of your pretty front teeth on it, the magic star won't mend it. But I expect it's a specially... I expect that it's a specially lucky thing to find, all the same." It was a good cake, and no one had any fault to find with it, except that it was no bigger than what was needed. When it was all cut up, there was a large slice for each of the children, but nothing left over. No coming again. The slices soon disappeared, and every now and then a trinket or a coin was discovered. Some found one, and some found two, and several found none, for that is the way luck goes, whether there is a doll with a wand on the cake or not. But when the cake was all eaten, there was no sign of any magic star. "Bless me," said the cook. "Then it can't have been made of silver after all. It must have been melted. Or perhaps Mr. Prentice was right, and it was really magical, and it just vanished and gone back to fairyland. Not a nice trick to play, I don't think. He looked at Prentice with a smirk, and Prentice looked at him with dark eyes and did not smile at all. Alright, so, yeah, pretty much the big great cake is made. All the children are really happy because it's like, oh, we might find some things, and they do. They find some, like, coins and trinkets, but they actually do not find the star that is apparently of fairy make, and Prentice is up to something. He either knows what happened, or he knows that that the cook probably just ended up not even putting it in because he doesn't believe in fairies. So, interesting. Back to it here. All the same, the silver star was indeed of Fey Star. The apprentice was not one to make mistakes about that things of sort. No, wait, about things of that sort. There you go. What had happened was that one of the boys at the feast had had swallowed it without even noticing it, although he had found a silver coin in his slice and had given it to Nell, the little girl next to him. She looked so disappointed at finding nothing lucky in hers. He sometimes wondered what had really become the star, and did not know that it remained with him, tucked away in some place where it could not be felt. For that was what it was intended to do. There it waited for a long time, until its day came. Okay, that's interesting. I wouldn't. Yeah, of course. I don't know why I didn't think of that. A kid just literally swallowed it whole, so it must have been some like little tiny little star, which probably would make sense. If a kid would have to swallow it whole, it'd be a tiny star. It would have to be. So I don't know why I pictured like a huge monstrous like rock-sized star. Some kid doesn't even notice the points going. That'd be terrible. That'd be awful. But anyway, back to it here. Alright. The feast had been in midwinter, but it was now June, and the night was hardly dark at all. The boy got up before dawn, for he did not wish to sleep. It was his 10th birthday. He looked out of the window, and the world seemed quiet and expectant. A little breeze, cool and fragrant, stirred the waking trees. Then the dawn came, and far away he heard the dawn song of the birds beginning, growing as it came towards him, until it rushed over him, filling all the land round the house, passed on like a wave of music into the west, as the sun rose above the dim of the world. It reminds me of Fairy, he heard himself say, but in Fairy the people sing too. Then he began to sing, high and clear, in strange words that he seemed to know by heart. And in that moment the star fell out of his mouth, and he caught it on his open hand. It was now bright silver. It was bright silver now. I'm mixing up words now. Glistening in the sunlight, but it quivered and rose a little, as if it was about to fly away. Without thinking, he clapped his hand to his head, and there the star stayed in the middle of his forehead. And he wore it for many years. Wow, okay, that's dedication. So he's just walking around, this little kid who ate the star. Years later, on his 10th birthday, just slaps it on his head, and starhead. He just walks around with a giant, well, no, not giant, small. It's a small star. But even then, it's still a star on his forehead. That's interesting. Okay. Okay, so back to it here. Few people in the village noticed it, though. Oh, okay. Though it was not invisible to attentive eyes. But it became part of his face, and it did not usually shine at all. Okay, it's okay. Okay. Some of its light passed into his eyes, and his voice, which had begun to grow beautiful as soon as the star came to him, became ever more beautiful as he grew up. People liked to hear him speak, even if it was no more than a good morning. He became well known in his country, not only in his own village, but in many others round about, for his good workmanship. His father was a smith, and he followed him in his craft and bettered it. Smithson he was called while his father was still alive, and then just Smith. For by that time he was the best smith between Far Easton and Westwood, and he could make all kinds of things of iron in his smithy. Most of them, of course, were plain and useful, meant for daily needs. Farm tools, carpenter's tools, kitchen tools, and pots and pans, bars and bolts and hinges, pot hooks, fire dogs, and horseshoes, and the like. A whole bunch of random stuff. Got it. They were strong and lasting, but they also had a grace about them, being shapely in their kinds, good to handle and to look at. But some things, when he had the time, he made for delight, and they were beautiful, for he could work iron into wonderful forms that looked as light and delicate as the spray of leaves and blossom, but kept the stern strength of iron, or seemed even stronger. Few could pass by one of the gates or lattices that he made without stopping to admire it. No one could pass through it once it was shut. He sang when he was making things of this sort, and when Smith began to sing, those nearby stopped their own work and came to the smithy to listen. So we'll do a little a break here too. Yeah, so apparently like the Smith guy, which I'm guessing is the whole what the story's about, which is cool. I like the whole background of it where he accidentally eats the star and now it's part of him, and then now because of this fairy star that's inside of him, he gets all of this wondrous extra skills that he used to kind of have, but now it's like to the extreme pretty much, and it's like almost nothing to him, which is really cool. And I do like how he's like singing all the time, and for me as like a Tolkien like nerd, I guess, it reminds me of Tom Bombadil. I'm like, oh man, I wonder if he does like the whole crossover thing, where he's in like another book, and like in this story, Smith is actually Tom Bombadil because he likes to sing a whole lot, and he's just everybody wants to hear him, and he makes wondrous things. Obviously, people stop by and they're like, oh, we gotta like just admire what he made this week or next, or the next week, and it's something completely different, but it's like something to revel at, It's, I don't know, I just thought about it and I'm like, this guy just reminds me of Tommy B, good old Tommy B, Tom Bombadil. Because he's always singing, he's always making things that are wondrous to behold, so, I don't know, it's interesting, and maybe not, maybe it's just another character that Tolkien wrote, it's just some joyous guy that got magical powers from a fairy star. Probably. So, we'll just go back to the story. That was all that most people knew about him. It was enough indeed, and more than most men and women in the village achieved, even those who were skilled and hard-working. But there was more to know, for Smith became acquainted with the fairy. In some regions of it he knew as well as any mortal can, though since too many had become like Noakes, he spoke of this to few people, except his wife and his children. His wife was Nell, to whom he gave the silver coin. Oh, that's nice. And his daughter was Nan, and his son was Ned Smithson. So they got Smith, just Smith, I guess. I don't know. I gotta go back here actually, see what did they ever give him the name? I don't know actually. I don't think it really said. No, it's just like a boy, now he's just called Smith. Okay, so we got Smith, we got Nell, Nan, and Ned. Interesting. Okay, so we go back to his family here. From them, it could not have been kept secret anyway, for they sometimes saw the star shining on his forehead, and when he came back from one of his long walks, he would take alone now and then in the evening, or when he returned from a journey. Oh, okay, mysterious. I like that. From time to time he would go off, sometimes walking, sometimes riding, and it was generally supposed that it was on business, and sometimes it was, and sometimes it was not. At any rate, not to get orders for work, or to buy pig iron and charcoal and other supplies, though he attended to such things with care and knew how to turn an honest penny into twopence, as the saying went. But he had business of his own kind in Fairy, and he was welcome there, for the star shone bright on his brow, and he was as safe as a mortal can be in that perilous country. The lesser evils avoided the star, and from the greater evils he was guarded. For that he was grateful, for he soon became wise and understood that the marvels of Fairy cannot be approached without danger, and that many of the evils cannot be challenged without weapons of power too great for any mortal to wield. He remained a learner and explorer, not a warrior, and though in time he could have forged weapons that in his world would have been power enough to become the matter of great tale, and be worth a king's ransom, he knew that in Fairy they would have been of small account. So among all the things that he made, it was not remembered that he ever forged a sword or a spear or an arrowhead. In Fairy at first he walked for the most part quietly among the lesser folk and the gentler creatures in the woods, and not meads, I don't think it'd be meads, pretty much meadows of fair valleys, and by the bright waters in which at night strange stars shone, and at dawn the gleaming peaks of far mountains were mirrored. Some of his briefer visits he spent looking only at one tree or one flower. But later in longer journeys he had seen things of both beauty and terror that he could not clearly remember nor report to his friends, though he knew that they dwelt deep in his heart. But some things he did not forget, and they remained in his mind as wonders and mysteries that he often recalled. Cool, I like this. I like this vibe now, too. So yeah, Smith goes off. Pretty much his family notices that he goes off every now and then, and I guess some of his journeys, when he comes back, the star shines bright because of like his experience and stuff like that. Which would be, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like if he did something adventurous and like awesome, and he comes back all happy and like content with himself, of course, it's gonna shine bright. Which, yeah, it's pretty much a reflection of what his emotions are, based on the return journey. But I'm assuming if it's on business, I'm just guessing here. If it's mostly on business, he'll come back and the star's not shining because it's just business, everyday life kind of thing. But when he goes to fairy and it's a longer, arduous journey and stuff like that, he comes back as an experienced traveler and whatnot, and his star shines brighter because more knowledge, more experience. But that's just my guess here. First time reading, so I'm trying to read into stuff like that. So, and yeah. So he gets to travel deeper into fairies and know about that even though he could forge weapons, it would mean absolutely nothing in fairy, because I'm assuming it's all enchanted and magical. So having just a regular steel sword would probably be like a toothpick to them, is what I get the vibe of fairy. So yeah, let's go back to it here. When he first began to walk far without a guide, he thought he would discover the further bounds of the land. But great mountains rose before him, and going by long ways round about them, he came at last to a desolate shore. He stood beside the sea of windless storm, where the blue waves like snow-clad hills rolled silently out of unlight to the long strand, bearing the white ships that returned from battles, on the dark marches of which men knew nothing. He saw a great ship cast high upon... flip the page. High upon the land, and the waters fell back in foam without a sound. The 11 mariners were tall and terrible. Their swords shone and their spears glinted, and a piercing light was in their eyes. Suddenly they lifted up their voices in a song of triumph, and his heart was shaken with fear. And he fell upon his face, and they passed over him and went away into the echoing hills. Afterwards he went no more to that strand, believing that he was in an island realm beleaguered by the sea. And he turned his mind towards the mountains, desiring to come to the heart of the kingdom. Once in these wanderings he was overtaken by a grey mist, and strayed long at a loss, until the mist rolled away, and he found that he was in a wide plain. Far off there was a great hill of shadow, and out of that shadow, which was its root, he saw the king's tree springing up, tower upon tower, into the sky, and its light was like the sun at noon. And it bore at once leaves and flowers and fruits uncounted, and not one was the same as any other that grew on that tree. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so he decides, actually, a little note too, is that he apparently had a guide, I guess unmentioned, unnamed, that he went into fairy with. So there's a lot to this history of fairy that we don't really get a lot of, which is really cool. I like those kind of stories where this character is mentioned that he does do a lot of exploring and wandering and whatnot, but this one says that he has a guide, but now he's doing it by himself. So it just makes me wonder, like, oh, I wonder what that guide was all about. If he was like super trusting of him, or what they looked like, because it's fairy, you never know. But then I guess now he's off on his own, and when he's off on his own, he comes to this spot where it's he's pretty much by the sea, apparently, and these mariners from the sea come onto the coast, and they pretty much scare him half to death, and he's just like, I'm never going there again. So he decides to just go to the mountains and sees the king's tree, magical tree that I guess just gives life and has an abundancy of flowers and just a lot of beautiful stuff surrounding it. So pretty cool. I like it. So back to it here. He never saw that tree again, though he often sought for it. On one such journey, climbing into the outer mountains, he came to a deep dale among them, and at its bottom lay a lake, calm and unruffled, though a breeze stirred the woods. there you go, that surrounded it. In that dale the light was like a red sunset, but the light came up from the lake. From a low cliff that overhung it he looked down, and it seemed that he could see to an immeasurable depth. And there he beheld strange shapes of flame bending and branching and wavering, like great weeds in a sea dingle, and fiery creatures went to and fro among them. Filled with wonder he went down to the water's edge, and tried it with his foot, but it was not water. It was harder than stone and sleeker than glass. He stepped on it, and he fell heavily, and a ringing boom ran across the lake and echoed in its shores. This is like some really trippy stuff here. This is wild. Okay. At once the breeze rose to a wild wind. Wind is capitalized here, so interesting that it's put like that. It's like its own entity. It's really cool. Sorry, kind of a little sidetracked. It was interesting. Wind is capitalized. Usually it's not really like that. So, at once the breeze rose to a wild wind, roaring like a great beast, and it swept him up and flung him on the shore, and it drove him up the slopes, whirling and falling like a dead leaf. So, sorry, another one. So yeah, it is like it's compared to a great beast. So kind of an entity, like an elemental entity, which wouldn't, it wouldn't be too far fetched in the land of fairies. So cool. All right. He put his arms around the stem of a young birch and clung to it, and the wind wrestled fiercely with them, trying to tear him away. But when the birch was bent down to the ground by the blast and enclosed him in its branches. When at last the wind passed on, he rose and saw that the birch was naked. It was stripped of every leaf, and it wept, and tears fell from its branches like rain. He set his hand upon its white bark, saying, "Blessed the blah, 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 blah." He did not say that. He did not have tongue-tied on his mind right there. He said, "Blessed be the birch. What can I do to make amends or give thanks?" He felt the answer of the tree pass up from his hand. "Nothing," it said. "Go away, the wind is hunting you. You do not belong here. Go away and never return." And as he climbed back out of that dale, he felt the tears of the birch trickle down his face, and they were bitter on his lips. His heart was saddened as he went along his long road, and for some time he did not enter Fairy again. But he could not forsake it, and when he returned, his desire was still stronger to go deep into the land. Yeah, actually, you know what? We're going to end the episode right here. Just because, it's about the 30-page mark. Oh, Bilbo just fell down. Oh, no. Yeah, 30-page mark, and I feel like that's good enough, for me, at least. I'll just put them on the side here. So, yeah, okay. So, interesting beginnings here of Smith of Wootton Major. I get the whole gist of actual Smith guy here exploring fairy realm, and apparently a lot of things are scary when he's on his own. And apparently he stepped into a lake here at the very end of it, and he pretty much stepped through it, and then a big wind swept him away after like this big boom happened, and he got swept away, and the wind does not like him at all, apparently. And the pretty much the branches of the birch apparently is alive, so the birch tree is alive, and it pretty much tells him not to go anywhere in Fairy again. And we kind of get left off here at this point where our main character here, Smith, is he doesn't come back for a lot of years, but it's still in his memory, all of these adventures and all these terrifying things that would happen to him. But when he does come back, obviously right now, as we read, that he remembers pretty much everything else, and he's excited to go back. So, yeah, I kind of like that. So, I will return again for part 2. I'm not sure if it's going to be directly after, or or if I'm going to wait another few chapters of the Silmarillion and come back with it. Really, it's just like a personal project, so obviously whoever sees this, you can probably tell me you want me to do another one after this, or it's just going to be on the internet for anybody to see, and it's going to be a long time until anybody sees it. So, yeah. So, and then I'll do my final thoughts of the whole book in general on the second part of this book. I feel like it would be only fitting to really do it that way. So I'll hopefully be wearing a different shirt so you guys know there's a different video. So, yeah, Smith of Wootton Major, a great start so far. Hope you guys actually like the voices that I've included in the book itself. And with that all being said, just stay tuned for the next episode, and may the light of Elbereth be with you all. Farewell.